Okay, I think you can get started now. So we have.
Let me share my screen here. Can you see my screen? Oops.
Yes,
that's
yes,
wrong.
yes.
Where are my slides?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Oh, there it is. That's where I wanted to start. Oh, right. Well, so welcome back. We're I think it's lecture 7 now. So we are closing in on the final stretch of our lecture. And so what I wanted to do today was, first of all, it's going to be up to you at the beginning. I kind of gave a loosely formulated homework last time, so I would like to see, what people came up with, if they came up with something. And then we're trying to tie up some of the loose ends with the math conversion, and particularly document conversion of math documents from LaTeX and other sources. And then we're going to have a look at some of the other documents that we haven't really discussed, other formats as well as other sources. Think of it as things coming from images, things coming from PDFs, generating PDFs. I'll also talk a tiny bit about EPUB. And that will then kind of close out this kind of the major second part of the lecture, and then next lecture, which is actually already tomorrow, and I think we'll then start with graphics, primarily diagrams, and these kind of artifacts that we'll have in documents, in particular in STEM documents. Right. Okay. So my first question is to all of you. Has anybody had a chance to look into these SVG formulas that I've posted that were on the repository? Have you had a time to play around with it? And if you have, would you like to share what you've done?
See, if anybody has done it, please raise your hands. Okay, Shankar has raised your hand. So maybe you can release the screen. You want to share your screen, Shankar?
Yes, please. Go ahead. I think I've released my screen.
I'm not able to. Okay, sorry. Actually, no, I raised my hands. It was a kind of a homework to work on, the documents which was converted on Pandoc and, right?
That was the second part of the homework. Yes, so that's on. Hold on, let me share my slides again. So that's the first of the homework, and the second one was this one.
Okay.
That I asked you to have a look at the document. So has anybody? Oops. Has anybody played around with the SVG with the SVG formulas? No one. Nope, nobody's played with the tab index, changed the order of the formulas, did a bit of styling. I think we should have an exam at the end of the lecture.
I went through the tabbing and all that. I went through tabbing and navigation, all that. But I don't know what is expected out of it, actually.
I don't know. I just said, so what I said last time was, what is a good idea is if you just take the SVG and add different kind of tab indices, kind of change the order of elements around in which you tab through, and so on. That kind of gives you more of a feeling of what you can do, and in particular of what the flexibilities are with these structures. But I appreciate it. So if nobody's done that,
I went through it, and probably I was just trying to check whether tabbing 0 or tabbing 1 and all that with the formulas, like, all at tabbing 0, why it was having tabbing 0 and why it was having tab index of 1, 2 and all that. But as you said, I have not changed anything and checked it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. No. Okay. Right. So if nobody else wants to pipe up, then I mean, then we move effectively to the next one. Has anybody looked at the math documents that we had converted?
Okay,
Yes.
Shankar.
I
Go
went
on.
through this actually. And I think I don't have to share the screen, but only thing is, I found that from Panda conversion, even in the first line, like as you're mentioning, that language is one of the important component. So the language, declaration of English was missing in the Pandoc document. If you check it
Right.
over, right?
So here's
So
the Pandoc
language was
document.
not given. Yeah. Just check
It's
the
rendering
source
here.
here. Yeah, language was missing, and also even in the content also, like for example, in the author, it's Michael Remoda and Stefan Gerbold, and has gone somewhere. I don't know where it went.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Similarly, certain content like abstract, that was also missing. Totally, the content was misplaced somewhere on the bottom somewhere. Okay.
Switch off
And I
background
found
settings.
even in the formatting side, like the introduction and all that, it has been like from the capitalized letters, it has changed to a normal character. I don't know like how the style sheet applied here, right? And
Yes, so
some,
there's a lot of these small
yeah,
things.
yeah,
Let's have a look whether that's any better with the other conversion. So this is the make for HD conversion.
yeah. Actually, there it was more about like the citation. Wherever there is a citation, it's just mentioned as a question mark. So
Yep.
I don't know how it converted the whole 1, 2, 3 and all the numbers into question mark, and the footer content was placed wrongly. It was not as per the pages. Probably it placed the end, and I don't know how it changed the date even, like in the date where there is a date called April 9, 2021. In the original document it was January 21, but it has changed to April 9, 2021.
Yes, so that was the date when I did the conversion, right?
Okay, so
effectively
the system date. Okay.
Yeah. So because that just went so particular make for HD that goes through the later converter, and if you have a slash date in your document,
Okay.
it picks up the date of the document exactly.
Graphics in both the places, like graphics was not rendered in the same way as expected actually.
Yes, correct, Volker.
Yeah.
Even at my end, I did not find the figures attached. Diagrams.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Graphics in both the thing, it was not working paka. Yeah. And there are
Okay. Yeah.
again, like equation number was retained in math for HD, but
Yes,
not
correct.
in Pandoc.
Not in Pandoc.
Not in Pandoc. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And references section, it was totally cut off in like the whole content was removed in math
Removed.
for HD.
Which section was that? Which section was removed?
References section. It was there in the
References,
PDF.
where yeah, the bibliography. Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
bibliography. In Pandoc, it has not been represented in full, but it has changed the content, orientation, all that. Like doesn't have heading even as references.
Right.
Just
So let's
4
have a
or
look
5
at
lines from
Pandoc.
it.
Yeah.
And this last line, the last line, Volker, which you just showed on Pandoc.
That's that one. That's Pandoc, right?
Yes. This is in the original PDF. It
Correct.
is present on the
Abstract.
first page.
Yeah,
In
abstract
the
page.
footnotes.
Because what is that? That's a footnote, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So it's always a good question. So I think you've identified the major problems there. Most of the major problems. One of which is the last one I've just mentioned, footnotes. My question to all of you: where are you going to put footnotes on a document?
Yeah, there was one question I also had.
Is not separated into pages.
Yeah. So probably at the end of the whole HTML, I believe, right?
Yes. So if
doesn't have a page here.
So if you have a paginated document, you know where the footnote goes. It goes on the same page. If you have no page breaks,
yeah.
Well, I suppose the end of the document is as good as any.
Yeah. Right.
So if you compare that to something like, say, what you have in a Wikipedia article, where you have little references, etc., all you have is you effectively you jump to the end of the document. They're all at the end.
Yeah.
So so just a question to you: what do you think is important for footnotes or references of that nature?
The only thing is if it is referenced there and probably has a link to go there, I think at least it will be helpful for us. Like the focus and it goes to the reference and comes back.
Well,
Then,
yeah.
Yeah.
So going to the reference is easy. The important part you've just mentioned is coming back.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you think about it, you read a document on that page. Now you read a book on that page. There is a footnote. So you glance down and you go back up. You might have to look a bit for where you were exactly in the text, but that's easy enough. If you do that on a large, long document on a web page, it jumps to the very end, and then you have to scroll back and find your place. It's impossible. That's why good practice is always having backlinks. And that's, I think it's Pandoc which tries to include those backlinks, right? So here's the footnote, right? Now the footnote, backlink here.
Yeah.
Gets you back to the reference where you were, and now you can continue reading here.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me go to the side which I've kind of where I've just put together some of the points which I've seen and which are there. And yes, so the bibliography is missing, the referencing, footnotes, some of these things, some of the figures are broken, and so on and so forth. Now, all of these things, in many ways, can be fixed. And the way you can fix some of them is by working more diligently with the conversion tools. So all of these have, like Pandoc has many ways you can tweak the converter. So there's a bunch of what's called Pandoc filters, which are effectively post-processors, which you can use in order to improve your output. In particular, so I'll just put together a couple of links on my slide. So one is that kind of if you do a general search on GitHub, for instance, on Pandoc filters, you come across more than 70 repositories which offer various types of filters. And interestingly enough, so for instance, the second one already is one that helps you with cross-referencing, right? These things which you couldn't, which ended up in terms of question marks on the page, etc. So there's all kinds of, so this is one where you can just use a cross-reference filter. So this is all for doing clever things with LaTeX packages which use referencing, in particular things like cleverref, etc. So these, I think that might have been the one we've just been to. That the one? Yes, that's the one we've just been to. There's others like XNOS, which is particularly useful if you have equation numbering and referencing to equation numbering, table numbering, figure numbers, right? So you get automatically the links between these elements. So as I said, all of these are filters. That means you have to kind of select what you want and what you need for a particular document. You don't always need all of them, and depending on what packages authors have used, you might need different filters. So it's a bit of a, if you like, there's a lot of potential for extensions, but it always has you have to do a bit of research. What do you need for a particular document? What are the best filters? In addition, and that's the best thing, obviously, for Pandoc, and not just for Pandoc. Pandoc supports Lua filters. What are Lua filters? Lua is a kind of in itself. For those of you who are not familiar with it, is a lightweight scripting language which is built on top of C or C++. And the idea there is that with Lua itself is a programming language, but the whole paradigm of Lua is that you allow for a lightweight scripting language which allows you to do post-processing on data structures, or general or also intermediate processing on data structures with just very few scripting arguments. And so, for instance, Pandoc has an entire collection of Lua filters, which not only give you a very, very easy way of including tiny scripts, if you like, that just tweak the occasional command or the output of the occasional LaTeX command, but it also allows a way of actually creating your own very easily done filters. So, for instance, for citations and for section referencing and for short captions and for all kinds of things, there's all kinds of filters which you can just use, pick up, download, and start using. And of course, there's always a bit of experimentation to go with it. But in many ways, all of these, there's for bibliographies, etc., for working with BibTeX and so on. For all of these issues that you have now identified in the document, there will be some sort of a filter which can take care of that. Obviously, there will always be documents which will be so complex and complicated that you might not find yet a filter for it that solves all the problems. What about Make4HD? Well, Make4HD has the advantage that you can use multiple backends. So the one the one I've used here in the examples is Tech4HD, which is effectively the backend which works with the normal LaTeX contributions. And the normal LaTeX contributions are things like TechLive, DTech, MikTeX for Windows. There are other tech distributions out there. One in particular is LuaTeX. LuaTeX, again, has the idea of having a Lua-style scripting language built in, meaning that you can easily enter commands in Tech, which kind of do, depending on what you need as output, do different things in their output. And I've linked to there, and this is effective LuaTeX, and it is in principle a way to add lightweight scripting to Tech, and that can be particularly exploited for conversion. And the way you can exploit it for conversion is using a I forgot to put the link here, but there is a backend for Make4HD which is called Lua4HD, which allows you to do all kinds of little post conversion filtering and processing for the output. So that's very similar to what you can do in Pandoc. Pandoc, in many ways, since it's a much broader system, has a lot more filters built by the community out there, which you might want to be able to exploit. Right. And I'll just, just to summarize in many ways, let's go over some of these issues that we've just outlined in a bit more detail what you can do, or what is available out there. So for bibliographies and citations, there's very, very good tooling support. Why it hasn't really been in the examples I've used or I've shown you has one primary reason, and the reason is that I didn't use the actual bibliography file in order to do the conversions. So that was deliberately left off. So for those of you who want to play with it, in the zipped version of the examples, which is on the GitHub repository, the bibliography file is included. And if you do the conversion, the bibliography should actually be in there right away. So if you actually do the conversion yourself, by all means, use the bibliography file, and then it should be included already. As you can see, as we've said earlier, backlinks are good, and not just for accessibility. Backlinks are always good. Pandoc adds them automatically. Tech4HD is not that well supported when it comes to backlinks. Some of them work, some won't. What else? We've been talking about cross-references. So cross-referencing, obviously, I mean, that's the whole point of the web, right? You want to reference everywhere and anywhere, every time. So in many ways, referencing is a good thing, but you have to do it right, or it has to be done right. And sometimes people, in particular authors, don't do it really well, meaning that they, for instance, use all kinds of clever things, such as abbreviation of references, and that's one of the things you have to do, kind of get rid of manually sometimes if you want to do referencing. So, for instance, never reference a range of elements. So, oh, reference 1 to 8. While that looks good on paper, that comes out really, really poorly when you actually want to be able to go to these references physically. It already comes out badly if you're just sitting in a PDF document and want to go to the other page. But if you're on the web, on a web document, that's even worse. These are things. Footnotes. Well, the best thing is always avoid footnotes. My general recommendation, which I always give to my students when they start writing papers, if you put something in a footnote, think about how important it actually is in order for
Akash,
the reader to...
Question. Welcome. Akashdeep has a question.
Akash, all right. Yes, please. Go on before I go on my footnote rant.
You are, Akash, you are on silent. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So, Volker, my doubt is if there is a equation which is referenced at multiple places, so how in that kind of a scenario we can create the cross-referencing?
So if effectively you get the same back referencing features as you would get, for instance, on Wikipedia. So if you get a Wikipedia page, you get multiple back references, right?
Okay.
So that's one way of doing it. There's a even more clever way. Unfortunately, you can't do that directly in a document, and that is you doing it with a little JavaScript update, meaning that you actually update the link, the back reference link, when you go there, right? So you click the link, you end up there, and the backlink is being updated.
I see. Okay. Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Right. Footnotes again. So let me start my rant on footnotes. What I normally explain to particularly to students which start with their scientific writing and tend to start often with putting a lot of footnotes in their papers. And the question there is always, well, if something is really important for the understanding of the content, then it shouldn't be in the footnote. And that often does not really leave a lot that needs to be in footnotes. As very, very occasionally has to be kind of maybe, even if it's just an explanation of an abbreviation or something, in my opinion, that should always be right in the text. So there's very, very few occasions where you really need a footnote. There are certain citation styles, in particular in social sciences, where footnotes are kind of the main means of using of introducing citations. That obviously is not really what you want on the web. And if you do want it on the web, then kind of we do it Wikipedia style, as we've mentioned before, because that's pretty much the main way of doing it. And that allows you to kind of work with multiple back references. It doesn't, you don't have to do the dittos and the dots and these things anymore, because you can just link to the same place and have multiple back references. Other things that we haven't had in those documents we've been talking about, but that are important: indices, glossaries, appendices, these kind of things. Where appendices are easy, they normally work as normal sections. Indices in web documents are rarely used, and if you really need them, then you might want to do them more as a navigation element of the page, rather than having an extra index at the very end of the document. So normally web indices are somewhere, say, on the left-hand side. There's a navigation bar and contains all the elements that you might want to move to. Same thing for glossaries. Glossaries in general these days become very unfashionable. Yes, if you have a big book, for instance, then a glossary is useful. But in generally for most writing, glossaries can easily be outsourced. You just link to Wikipedia articles, you link to other people's work, you link to the, you use the power of the web, which is given to you, right? Think outside your own little piece of writing. Other things we find in math, and which are a bit nasty. So one is theorem environments, and then things like proof environments. Now that's a problem which generally tech converters don't treat very well. They do if it's not too nastily nested, but some authors start nesting environments quite heavily, and then it becomes difficult. Generally, you should always think about these kind of environments in terms of what they really are. In many ways, they're not much different than sections. A theorem is something which is kind of a small paragraph with a heading, and it's got some bespoke content, of course, but in many ways it's more something which you want to treat like a landmark, as you would treat any other section, paragraph, or other elements in the page. And there's a couple of ways how you can treat them, in particular on web pages, and I'll just go to one of the. Hold on, let me. I forgot to put that. Let's go to one of the pretext examples. So that pretext is a way of getting getting math documents onto the web, particularly in an open format. Let me have a look. Where's the HTML version of this? Oh, sorry, can't find it here. Online edition, is that the one? Maybe that's not a good example. Sorry, I should have linked to this one. Let's go to this one. That one looks much better. HTML. Right. So here is a pretext book, which it's kind of an open source textbook. This one is particular for calculus, and the way elements like so the way elements like these previews as well as theorems are being done in there. Let's see whether we can find a theorem. There should be a theorem somewhere. Well, if only I could find something. There's a definition. Oh, there's one. Okay, so the way these things are being done is, in a way, they're being done with a landmark element like this definition here, and then they're being hidden inside something that's called nodes, as in knowledge elements. KNOWLE, and they can pop up like this one here, for instance. Here's a node, and so that means that gives you a means of having a more hierarchical view on the entire book, that you can read more quickly, but you also can pop these nodes up at various places throughout the document. So instead of just linking back to something, you now have the power of actually opening up at the place where you reference the definition. If you reference it multiple times, it can be popped up at various places where you need it. So this is the permalink, for instance, and then it can be set in context, and here it is where it actually has been in context for the first time, right? So this is where it actually occurs for the first time, and where all the other adjacent definitions and figures and so on are there. And if you go back, and there it is where it's being cited, and then it pops up at that place and gives you the information right where you want it without you having to go back to the old, or to the section where it was originally being defined. So this is a way of treating things, and right. So that's pretext. Well, I'll show you a bit more about pretext later, and I'm not quite sure where my slides are. Here they are. Fine. So from another issue that particularly comes for people like us who write about computer science or articles about computer science, algorithm layout is something that is generally badly supported when it comes to converting elements. So there's various ways how to do this. One is, for instance, that to use a system called Prism.js, which allows you to include raw source code easily into HTML elements. An alternative solution is to do something with where you can use what is it called? Markdown. Markdown elements give you a nice way of including source code, and there's various ways how to do this. Hello. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
Because
Wolfgang.
my page here has changed to a different conversation.
No, we can see you and hear you.
Same algorithm layout, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, so somehow my Teams has changed entirely. Now I'm back at where I should be, where I can actually see the participants. All right. So algorithms are difficult to do, and my general advice when it comes to converting papers of content which contain a lot of algorithms, try to identify where the algorithms are, get them out and put them into a bespoke environment or bespoke system which can work with Markdown. And Prism.js is one of these which allows you to actually easily work with these, with algorithm content. Finally, one of the things we saw in our example document was that some of the images didn't come across well. Some of the images were either omitted or they were the wrong size, and all that has to do, of course, with diagram authoring. But that's just something we will start in our lecture tomorrow, where we'll start actually looking into diagrams. First thing is we'll go look at the diagrams as they come out of systems like LaTeX and others, and then what we can do with diagrams in general and how we can make them accessible in particular. This is something we're going to start tomorrow. That's why I'm not going to go on about that in more detail here. Right, and of course, that is something which is particularly important if you're an author yourself, but also if you work with authors and want to, in many ways, educate authors what is good and what is bad in terms of authoring when you need to convert something to accessible formats. I'm aware that, for instance, we've been working with some people in various American universities where departments put together guidelines for their staff and for their faculty in particular, how they should write their documents, in particular what they should avoid in documents in order to make the life easier for those who sit in places where they have to make them accessible and convert them. So one of the classic advices is always, well, if you're a good LaTeX author, try to pick one of the common style guides. It's like programming. In programming, there are so many ways how you can program and how you can structure your code well and how you can structure your code badly, and how you can document your code well and how you can leave your code entirely undocumented, for instance. The same thing it holds for LaTeX. And hence, there's plenty of style guides out there. People just have to start using some. Right? So there's all kinds of ways how to do standard sectioning, list, figures, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go through all those details. I've just put them together here on the slides for future reference for some of you, because I know that some of you are interested in that in particular. And obviously, we can always tell people what is good to do, but it's often much better to tell them what they should never do. And one of the things people should never do, well, people still do, I'm guilty of it myself, but use things like plain text in your macros or anywhere in your code. I mean, it's easy to include in LaTeX. It does sometimes really nice and fancy tricks, which you could only achieve in LaTeX with a lot more hassle, but it's effectively impossible to then convert or make accessible. So all these there's a lot of these, there's an entire list of LaTeX taboos out there. There's a link for it and things, there's the essential guide to LaTeX 2E usage, and that primarily talks about how not to use things. And it's a very long document, so we're not going to go through all of these in details. Just a couple of things you should always avoid are, and not just in LaTeX, real world dimensions are a nightmare. Never use things like inches, millimeters, centimeters. Always talk in terms of EMs and EXs, right? The relative sizes of your fonts, the relative width of an M element or the relative width of an X element. That way, things become much cleaner if you have to substitute fonts, as you have to do on the web a lot. Avoid any manual spacing of in particular manual spacing inside math elements. That is a nightmare. I can tell you from a math checks point of view, for instance, it's a real nightmare if people put backslash exclamations mark in there in order to overlay elements. General things that should be avoided are trickery with colors, hidden cross references. We've discussed those already. Anything that hard codes line breaks, line length, white space, etc. Because if you want to go to a flexible outline and a flexible layout, all of these things are just a nightmare to get rid of, and sometimes they just screw up the entire conversion process entirely. Other things I personally don't like, people, well, I've used, but that should still be avoided, and is things like custom counters and items, where you change the way items look like. I think on my slides I've done it only once. Generally, that should be avoided because, as you can imagine, all these converters don't really know how to deal with that. There's plenty of other things you should avoid in math mode. The one I always am very, very fond of pointing out is avoid too much mixing. So you can mix text and math mode, but you can nest that so deeply that ultimately it all breaks down. From just from a pure web display point of view, think about who has to parse what. If you have a piece of text, then this is being normally just rendered by the browser. If you have a piece of math, it's rendered by something like math checks. Now, if you have a piece of text inside that math, who's going to render that? Well, as it stands, math checks has an attempt at it. If you have then math again inside the text, which is inside the math, then again math checks tries to render that, tries to get the fonts right. Ultimately, it will fail. And if it's nested too much, it's just a nightmare. And the final point I want to make is punctuation near mathematical elements. I know mathematicians love to do that. It's still a nightmare to deal with. And I'll show you a quick example, because this is something I really, really hate. Hold on. Let's go to the semantic tree visualizer, and I'll show you a semantic. So let's just use some x plus y plus z equals 0, right? So this is a LaTeX. So this is an equation. Semantically, it's an equation. It gives you an addition with 3 summands on the left-hand side. Let's give you something on the right-hand side. Now let's add the dreaded period at the end because it's the end of the sentence. And now what do we get now? Oh, Well, that's the new version, isn't it? Let's put a comma there. Maybe that'll work better. That's it. That's what I wanted to show you. Now what do we get is, well, now we get a punctuated list which has only one punctuated element or one element which is separated by a punctuation, which is on the left-hand side, right? Rather than having the equation which starts as an equality, now we have some sort of a enumeration of elements which kind of ends at nothing and starts with a single element. And this comma just messes up the entire structure and therefore the navigation of the element. Right, so this is what I wanted to show you here. And I think there's more authoring on for the web. Forget about a thinking print only. That's the main takeaway from here. We've discussed all these points before, so we're not going to go into details. Instead, we'll take a little break now, and afterwards we'll start looking at other formats, in particular things that come from old material, and how to deal with scanned images and how to deal with PDF documents.
Okay, so you have a 5-minute break?
Yes, 5-minute break. I'll be back in a second.